Hiya, Dr. Allison JK here with you from the heart chakra of the planet, and I would love to help you put that sunset onto you with trauma. So there is a way to move beyond trauma, and it's not what's typically understood. It's not about talking about the trauma only. It's not about processing the trauma, because what happens is that we have different levels to our consciousness, and this is informed from both my Western psych background as well as my decades steeped in meditation and teaching meditation and being an India trained and certified yoga and meditation teacher, and the 10 years I spent in Asia exploring the connection between our consciousness and our subtle energy system. And when you have a trauma coming to you and you're fielding it, you can't field it with the conscious mind or the frontal lobe where you hear your thoughts from, yeah? It goes lodged back into the subconscious, and you can't hear the thoughts of the subconscious. And then there's something that I do in every single vibrational upgrade, because that's the name of the system I created, vibrational upgrade system, clearing and activation. It's never just a clearing alone, it's always with an activation. The light comes in and clears you in all these different ways, at all these different levels. That's a part of the process that I do most frequently, that many of you have heard me do and have received. Free-floating thoughts is what you hear every time after traumas. Clearing all traumas and their ensuing free-floating thoughts that could be in any way limiting this. So ensuing free-floating thoughts are because the traumas go into our subconscious, because we can't consciously feel it because it's so traumatizing. It goes into the buried state, or the silent block state. But that energy, that density, that block still speaks, just silently. And you could think of it as like a controlling mechanism to what thoughts you are more likely to have, and what thought patterns or self-talk you'll follow, tracks in your self-talk, your neurological pathways. I'm listing different ways to refer to it. And because of the energy blockage back there, of the type of trauma it was, it also speaks silently but very loudly to what thoughts you don't pay attention to, what neurological pathways you don't go down, what new considerations and possibilities and thoughts you have. So it's a very controlling mechanism. The free-floating thoughts are a part of that controlling mechanism, because our ego mind, which is what we call it in meditation, Buddhist meditation, it's the part of ourselves that's attached to our personality level, and it is given to us to navigate the physical plane so we don't go crazy with all the actual metaphysical data going on that's silent, or that it's beyond the five senses typical sensory capacities, which open up the longer you're engaged in this path. But the free-floating thoughts will protect you, because one of the main jobs of the ego mind is to keep us protected when we go into the new and into the unknown. So trauma is especially traumatizing. It's especially catalyzing of protection, so that same trauma doesn't happen again. So the ensuing free-floating thoughts, that could be deceiving, because thoughts you don't typically hear, thoughts directly related that are directly protecting you from that trauma happening again, and that severity that I just reflected in my face and eyes. But they're more like 5-7 layers up from for example, if I was abused as a child, whenever I walked into a dark room, if it was a well-lit room, I was never abused there. So let's say in the house that you grew up in, if you were abused as a child, the well-lit room was the front room, and there were windows in there, so the abuse didn't occur there so that the neighbors wouldn't see it. But whenever you went into that back living room or reception room or playroom or basement, it was dark, and that was where the abuse happened. So you have some kind of free-floating thought that you don't hear that associates dark rooms with abuse, and that in order to keep you safe and protected, you don't go into dark rooms. You don't know that that's necessarily, I mean, this is an overly simplified example, yeah? So right now, honestly, in the space I'm in, I don't have at the top of my disposal an example of a trauma, even though I've dealt with so many different types of trauma. And it takes a while to not only see, traumas want to stay buried until you have enough fresh consciousness cleared above that trauma, blocks above the trauma. So if you were abused and it wasn't sexual, You might not trust people, right? So you might be a hermit, or you might not go out a lot, right? So here's some of the additional layers. And so when I can get to them and clear the additional layers, the trauma starts to poke itself like a seed sprouting its sunflower above the soil. It starts to be able to open and begin to get the fresh light to it and the clearing to it, so that the trauma does eventually lift. So I just wanted you to understand that you can move beyond trauma, but it's not from talking about it. And it's not from like doing a lot of conscious work from it. You have to get to the energy lockdown. You have to get to where the trauma was deposited out of your system protecting you, and the natural mechanisms and functioning of the system. You have to get to that locked down energy that the trauma posed, and it doesn't let itself be seen right away. So somebody could have high blood pressure, right, for example, and they didn't even come in saying, I'm full of trauma, I have a heavily traumatized background, I'd like to work on releasing my traumas, right? But what I find, for example, is that there has been a lot of trauma in their past. And so their ego mind exerts a whole lot of control in order to keep them in that proverbial protection state. So they don't do well with flexibility or surprises or spontaneity. They have to have things very regimented, very predictable, so that, because those are the free-floating thoughts. If something is unpredictable, I could get hurt, right? And keeping one safe from those traumas. So trauma takes a while, and the more traumas you have, the longer it's going to take. And I don't mean to say long as in slow, but it's just not like you come in, you get for example, if you come in and you want to work on your money, and really where you're mostly blocked with the money receptivity is you don't allow yourself to choose what will help you create more of it coming in, because you have feelings of unworthiness, right? So if you come in and you're thinking you're working on your money blocks, those feelings of unworthiness could come from traumas where you were ignored as a child, for example, neglected, overlooked. And so those feelings of unworthiness don't allow you to go for more and have more ease with money, yeah? So it's not usually what you think that your block is or your pattern is. There is, in working with the unconscious and subconscious, there is always stuff buried that isn't something that you've talked about necessarily or identified. So we have to get to the energy, and we can release trauma. I've successfully been doing this for decades, and it is an absolutely beautiful process. I want to show you the butterfly so that you can open like the butterfly, or the alien butterfly. This one is, because we are in Glastonbury. So just know that you can be done with this old pattern and this old way of being you in a body on planet Earth, and move into the new. Let's put a sunset. This is release time now. Let's put a sunset onto you being this old version of yourself, because we are all being asked to evolve and grow. Yeah? So many blessings.